What was your we need to leave moment? Story 1. Years back, I was walking into a bank. As I pushed on the door, I locked eyes with a teller inside. She was looking at me, shaking her head. No. I then saw a person with a gun was robbing the place. I quickly backed up, ran to my car, and called 911. Someone may have crap in my pants. Not sure who, though. Reply 1. About 2 months ago, I'd stayed up past my usual bedtime. And as soon as I got in bed, I smelled something odd and was hearing some inconsistent banging and clattering from downstairs. I don't live in a great neighborhood, so none of this was unusual, but I got out of bed to check anyway and saw flames licking up the side of the building. Yelled at my wife to get out of bed and threw on some clothes, and we hightailed it out. Our building has a shared wall with the next, and that one had an apartment on the ground floor fully engulfed by the time we made it outside and ended up condemning the whole building. I was the first one to call 911. Have been jerking myself awake in the night pretty consistently since then. Reply 2. Dad was a Sydney bank worker in the ADS. You never hear about bank robberies these days. The security is too good, and the cash-on-hand token with time delay safes. Anyway, about 4 times a branch where he worked was robbed. He generally didn't know until he went to the front to see what the commotion was when the robbers had fled. I also know a former 80s bank robber. They were very serious about it, like they were properly organized units and planned them well. He's long past that life and a lovely guy. Like a lot of people who take paths like that, he had access to better drugs than his parents when young. Reply 3. I was up late one night in college writing a paper that was due the next day. One of my roommates was also up for some reason. Around 3 a.m. I'm finishing up and notice there's been a huge truck outside for an unusually long time. At about that time, I heard a loud thump sound outside, followed by a loud pop. Then my roommate shouts, "Holy crap, it's a raid!" I ran down the hall to look out his window to see the SWAT team going through this house down the street. There was a U-Haul van parked on our street within sight of that house for the next week. That landlord had a rough year because a water main broke on my street about a month later, and most of the water was flowing into the basement of that house. Story 2. Hiking in the mountains, the sun was setting, and we heard this low, guttural growl that just vibrated through the trees. No idea what it was, but the hair on my neck stood up, and we booked it down that trail faster than I thought possible. Felt like something was hunting us, and it wasn't friendly. Reply 1. Sounds like a bobcat or mountain lion. They do not roar, but instead make this scary ass sound. The only thing is, if you heard it, that was a warning. If they were hunting you, you would have heard nothing. Reply 2. My dumbass sister, now deceased but not because of this, had 3 massive dogs, 2 Great Danes and a Weimaraner that would have fought God him herself if he felt the need to. His kill list was long, including coyotes, raccoons, wild dogs, snakes, etc. She sent my niece, her daughter, to let the dogs out for one last potty before bed. My niece came in and said the dogs were being weird, refusing to go out, and hair was up on their backs. My sister yelled at her and told her to just go out there and pull the dogs out. She was like 7. So she kept trying, but they just refused to leave the house. She was wandering outside with treats and everything. A few weeks later, they found a cougar, the cat, not a 40-plus-year-old woman, Prince, and news was all out about a cougar being in the area. So my niece was probably being hunted because my sister didn't want to get up from the couch. Reply 3. I was hiking in the Rockies with my scout troop one time. I was in my early 20s, so I was a leader, but didn't have my own kid yet. We stopped for a lunch break at one point, and I wandered over to a semi-dried pond just to see what I could find for tracks to show the boys. 5 minutes later, we had our packs on and were moving in a tight cluster. Everyone will hold on to the pack of the person in front of them till I say otherwise, and singing summer camp songs at the top of our lungs for 20 minutes. The very fresh cat prints in the mud were wider than my foot was long. Reply 4. Took a snowy hike near Boulder, Colorado. As dusk approached, I got this feeling of, we gotta go. We got spooked for a few moments and turned around. We quickly move on from being scared and are laughing and having a great time hiking down the mountain. Then, right as we are backing out of the car, a mountain lion stalks out from where we had just come off the trail moments before. I believe it had been following us since we decided to turn around. Reply 5. Walking back to our cabin from another cabin on a trail in the woods with my dad when I was around 10. We could only see the trail by moonlight, so barely anything at all, when we heard a snort right behind us. We stopped and my dad pulled me slowly into the brush and trees. As we stood there silently, we all of a sudden saw the outline of a huge moose start to slowly walk past us. He towered over us. He was so massive. He just kept on walking, and we stood there for what seemed like forever until my dad started us back on the trail well behind the moose. Scary, amazing, beautiful. Didn't feel in danger, more awe. Reply 6. My Chihuahua and I were hiking alone on some pretty isolated Forest Service land on a trail that wasn't really used or maintained. About a quarter mile in the trail was completely covered in mountain lion scat, including fresh stuff. I very quickly lifted my Chihuahua above my head in an attempt to make us look more like a scary monster instead of a delicious treat, and booked it back to the car. Story 3. January 1979, Iran. I'm 9 years old. My mom is a low-level diplomat. She comes home from work and says, "We have 90 minutes to get to the airport to get out of the country." She knew the Shah's family was getting on a plane, and that the overthrow of the government was days if not hours away. We got on the cargo plane with one suitcase between the four of us and maybe $500. Sure enough, the next day was the overthrow, and lots of people were killed or executed. That's how I wound up in the United States. Reply 1. As a resident of the region, I'll share some of mine from the U.S. side. 1990 Pakistan evacuation of U.S. diplomats because of Desert Storm. 1988 Shining Path bombing in Peru, Miraflores. Guangzhou after NATO bombed a Chinese embassy in Yugoslavia. The U.S. consulate was on an island surrounded by millions of people. NATO ambassadors' homes and consulates were burned all over China. We had two plays, jump in the cars with our non-legal Marines and run the crowd down, or hop in a sailboat owned by the hotel adjacent to us and sail to Hong Kong. My mother handled this situation like the boss she was. Election of Xi in 2013, all my Chinese government friends told me to get out as things were going to change, and they did, and I left after 20 years of living there. Essentially, the country did a 180 on its policies. The crazy thing is that with all of this, my family has been through the worst part of being treated like trash in the U.S. Customs and the police have always thought I was a drug dealer. What's a Hispanic kid doing in China in the 90s? Why do you have two passports? The stupidity of these people is insane. Police still profile me, and I face all of the same issues as anyone with my skin color. Sad to say, but this is the only one that still stings. Reply 2. My algebra teacher in college was Iranian. When the revolution happened, he was attending university at UC Berkeley. He said it took weeks before he was able to get a hold of his parents, and any news about the situation he got in the US was all bad. When he finally spoke to his folks, they said, "We're fine, stay where you are." He later found out that a lot of the lines for international calls in Iran were tapped and recorded. The next time he saw his parents was over a decade later when they came to visit him in the US. Story 4. I was in Curitiba, Brazil, at a communist-themed bar called Fidel. The bartender was wearing a Che Guevara hat and sort of had that look. I was with like 4 other Americans. After a while, the bar emptied out and we were the only ones in there aside from the bartender. Suddenly, the bartender went over to the door, locked it, and closed a metal shutter over it, so we were trapped inside. He looked at us, pointed to a stairwell, and said, "Upstairs now." We were all freaked out, but figured better do what he said because he seemed serious. We went upstairs to this small room with chairs and a coffee table, thinking he was going to rob us or kill us or something, and I was looking for a window or some way to get out. We wait there in tense silence for a few minutes. Then, he comes upstairs with a huge bong and explains he closed the shutter because one of the customers in the bar previously had harassed tourists and had pulled a knife on someone the other day and tends to linger around drunk outside the bar. He suggested we wait upstairs for 30 minutes or so until the guy had stumbled home. Then he smoked us out on his huge bong and we had a laugh before going back to the hostel. Reply 1. Aw, that's actually really sweet of them. Brazil can be a wild place. I have Brazilian friends and have heard stories of different situations like being held at gunpoint or robbed, etc. And know of a family member from Portugal who was murdered there over her engagement ring. But it's good to know there are good people there. I mean, I already knew BC. I have friends who are good people, but you get my point. Story 5. I was out on a run, and I noticed this old woman, probably 60, 70, sitting on the curb. She waved me down, and so I ran over to her. She needed help getting up, but as we were talking, I just got this feeling in my gut that something was off. I felt really horrible abandoning an older woman who claimed to need help, but I couldn't shake that feeling, so I apologized for not being able to help and ran off. I looked back just a few seconds later, and this dude in a black truck pulls up to her and she gets up and gets in no problem. I probably broke a PR. I ran home so fast. Maybe I was just a paranoid female teenager, but to this day, 15 years later, I still get chills thinking about it and feel like it may have been a ploy to try to kidnap me. I was training for a marathon and ran that route a lot, so they could have been expecting me. Reply 1. My memory of this is a bit fuzzy. I remember some things, but most are just retelling from my dad. So, when I was about 6/7, my little sisters were playing in our front yard. 2 guys in a pickup stopped in front of our house. They asked us if we knew where a lawnmower repair shop was. This I remember clearly. Apparently, I said I didn't know. He told me he couldn't hear me and asked me to come closer. I told my sisters to run inside. They got my dad and those men took off. My dad got the license plate and brought me and my sisters to the police department. We were told that since he did nothing, there was nothing that could be done. It wasn't illegal for grown men to talk to us. This was the early 90s, and it could have been a crap cop we ended up getting, but no one did a thing. In my experience, until a crime is actually committed, they won't do anything. They didn't even take the license plate number. We moved within the year. Reply 2. Sadly, they don't squat most of the time. I reported an attack on me at a public beach. I gave them the partial license plate, the make and model of the vintage car, a description of his tattoos, along other identifying information that the man had told me before he attacked me, the very small town he worked in, what kind of work he did, and the name of his tattoo artist. I never heard anything back from them. Reply 3. While on a walk, my friend and I were asked to help an older lady with a walker get stuff from her upstairs apartment. I got this gut feeling that some guys could be waiting for us up there or that this was some setup. She was so insistent that we helped her, asking several times even after we declined. I felt bad, but to this day have never regretted not helping her. Reply 4. I think I also almost got kidnapped when I was in 6/7 grade. I was on a bike coming home from a friend's house. Just a neighborhood over, and I always see this truck with 2 people in it every now and then for months. The last time I saw them, they passed me and looped around the streets in the neighborhood to come towards me again, and pulled over when I had to pass. I never rode so fast. They looped around and my younger sister was outside on her scooter and I yelled at her to get inside. They almost pulled into our driveway, but an oncoming car almost swiped them and they drove off. Never saw them again. I'm now 33, male, and starting to get teary-eyed, terrified thinking it could happen to my kid. Story 6. 2 a.m. or so, driving on an unlit road. There was a guy lying on the road perpendicular to the road. The person driving slowed down and started to take off his seatbelt to move the person off the road. Something felt off, so I told him not to stop and drive around. The body wasn't there anymore on the way back. Could have just been a drunk guy or it could have been a trap, I'll never know. Reply 1. 10 p.m. at night. I was pregnant driving with my 3-year-old in the back seat and was coming up to a rural intersection/light. A light appeared on the side of the road and a young man came out onto the road from the cemetery, trying to get my attention. Not frantically, but enough for me to slow down and see what was going on. I rolled down my window and he stood about 8 feet away from my car, telling me there was an accident at the next intersection about 3 miles ahead. He didn't seem aggressive, but something was off. I know he noticed I was pregnant and my son was sleeping in the back. I said I had to go that way, but he was adamant that I shouldn't. He didn't say that the road was closed or anything like that. I said I would take whatever detour they had at that intersection. He said it was better to take the road going over the hill, the next right turn. I said I didn't know it that well, and at that point I thanked him, said I would figure out how to make my way home and drove off. I looked in the rear view when I was actively moving and he was gone. I figured he shut his flashlight off, that's why I couldn't see him, but it felt like he just disappeared and I thought it was odd that he would shut his light off and just stand in the dark. There are no streetlights where this happened. I ended up driving a different way home that night, not the one he told me to, but a longer, out-of-the-way scenic route. I kept running the scenario through my head. I couldn't shake his insistence that I avoid this intersection at all costs. The next day, I called the state police and asked if there was an accident at that intersection last night. They said no. I relayed to them what happened, and they were perplexed by it all, especially the young man posing as emergency personnel. I called my mother-in-law, who lives right on that intersection, and she said absolutely nothing happened that night. But to be fair, she's usually in bed by 9 p.m. My friend summed it up for me. So, a strange guy walked out of the cemetery late at night, told you to avoid an intersection because there's an accident. Won't tell you what happened at this intersection, won't tell you if the road is closed or how traffic is being diverted. Nothing. Just that you can't drive down there. Sounds like a ghost to me. Maybe he saved your life that night. It's been 20 years, and I still can't forget this interaction. I wonder what would have happened had I just ignored him and just drove through it. Guess I'll never know. Reply 2. A similar happened not far from my house near a wooded area. We passed by a van on the side of the road. As we passed, a woman looked at us and we saw her screaming for help and banging on her window. From what we could tell, she was alone in the car. I slowed and my husband almost jumped out, but I told him not to. I began to dial 911 and turned around. The moment I turned my car around, she took off in her van. Like, gunned it into town. Still only saw her in the car. No idea what was going on. Freaked us both out, though. Felt like a setup. Reply 3. This could have 100% been a trap. Source, I've fallen for it. Coming back home from something around 2009 to 2013, driving down a usually super busy road but fairly empty on this night around 9 p.m. I saw a kid lying in the middle of the road and two guys standing next to him flagged me down. I slowed down because he was right in front of my car and looked like something bad happened. As soon as I stopped, they pulled out their pistols, and I had one on my forehead within 5 seconds. After this happened, the kid lying in the middle of the road got up and assisted them with mugging me. Reply 4. The same thing happened to a friend and me when we were in high school. Grew up in a small agricultural suburb of Albuquerque. We'd drive out to the mouth of this concrete channel that diverted water from the desert down to the river, and we'd drink, take drugs, and listen to music there. We're driving home from one of these outings one night at about 2 or 3 a.m., rounding a corner on this little dirt road that takes you back to town, and suddenly there's a guy lying in the middle of the road, seemingly asleep. Same as you said, we start to take off our seatbelts to get out and see if he needs help, and then immediately realize something felt off. So, we drove around him. Definitely felt a sudden energy shift, like we were going to be ambushed or something. We were incredibly high when this happened. Reply 5. Years ago, we were driving home in the middle of the night through an outback town. It was completely shut down and deserted. I was hoping for a place to pee, but nothing was open. We passed through town and hit the road again, but I was busting, so I asked to pull over. I stepped out into the dark. It was flat bushland, no other traffic in sight. All I could see behind me in the distance was a house blasting music faintly miles away. To my left, back the way we'd come from, was the dead town. Clear black sky and bright stars, but not much of a moon that I can recall. Quiet, apart from distant music. I stepped out into the bush and just about undid my pants when I heard a voice croaking. I was a teen and my hair stood up on end. I heard it again. Help me! I admit I forgot my bladder and I ran to the car. I said I heard something and I wanted to leave. We started the car and pulled back onto the road. Not far down, a girl was lying on the other side. We had gotten up to speed by the time we saw her, so we shot her by the time we saw her, braked, and turned around. By this point, traffic from the opposite direction had come, and we all went to check her. Long story short, we went into town to find the police department. Closed like everything else. I pissed against a wall in relief, and help came for her. I don't know what happened to her. I don't think she was a decoy. Laying out on a road with no speed limit in the dark, when road trains can come flying through, doesn't seem like a safe way to catch people. But who knows? We wondered if she'd fallen off a bike or came from that distant party house. But we'll never know, and thankfully we got home safely. Story 7. I flew into a smaller terminal at the Cancun International Airport with 2 friends. I'm American and they're European nationals. After passport control, a border patrol agent says they have a taxi waiting if we'd like to take it. I decline, saying I'd rather take the shuttle to the main airport, but my 2 friends tell me I'm being paranoid and get into the car. It was locked from the inside, but luckily, the Mexican police showed up before the car started driving. They tell us it's an illegal taxi, and they offer to give us a ride to our hotel instead. Before my friends can answer, I say thanks, but no thanks, and we finally take the shuttle. Called a real taxi and made it to our hotel safely. It was one of the few times being a paranoid American really worked out. Reply 1. Every time I fly into Cancun, I just put my blinders on and beeline to the area where the transfer shuttles are. That area is its own crap show though, LOL. Always hate that part of going to Mexico. Reply 2. Pre-arrange transportation through the hotel, resort you're with, and flatly ignore everyone else, and you'll be fine. Pretty unlikely you'll end up kidnapped or stabbed, but they will very aggressively try and get your money if you engage. The negotiation culture is also very strong down there. As an American, your life experiences buying stuff leave you completely unprepared, and they know it. The first price is never the price, and many will bait and switch if they sense weakness. If you don't go back and forth with people, ideally in Spanish, that's the cheat code, you're going to get gouged to crap. Reply 3, American here. I was departing Mexico and by myself, a female, so I was nervous anyway. I felt someone staring at me and it was the guy that was going through my luggage but had stopped searching and was just staring at me. So I thought, oh crap, do I need to tip him? So I handed him $5 and he closed my luggage and zipped it up. Then I thought, oh crap, I just bribed an airport employee. Reply 4, I traveled a lot as a kid and I got used to the routine. Smile and shake their hand, passing them folded money, while you say how much you enjoyed their lovely country and hope to come back soon. And I casually mentioned this to my mates who were only used to package holidays to Spain and they're just... Well, I didn't think it was weird until they were giving me that look. Reply 5, took my kid to Disneyland Paris by myself from the UK a few years ago. Got off the airplane to find the Disney Run shuttle. I knew it was a regularly run bus, but didn't know the schedule. Turns out it was an hour and a half or so wait. Head back to the taxi area. A driver comes up to me, offering a ride. I'm like, sure. He led us out the back way, really quickly, to a random car park, to his car. But not until our bags are safely in the car and we've been driving for a few minutes. Am I finally thinking, wait, WTF happened? So I share my location with my family and text every person I can think of. Meanwhile, my kid is blabbering away, and I'm trying to stay calm and collected on this trip to our final destination of doom. But then, 90 euros, and what felt like an eternity later, we arrived at Disneyland safe and sound. But honestly, I was petrified. I was just so flustered trying to get us there, I didn't think at all. Story 8 was part of a wilderness camping trip as a kid with counselors in the mountains. We had just set up camp when all of a sudden people from higher up were fleeing down and everyone was in a panic. There was a forest fire rapidly descending down towards us. The counselors basically threw what they could back in the vans, wrangled up approximately 15 kids and got us out. We ended up at some random restaurant. As an adult, I think about how terrifying it must have been for those young counselors responsible for a bunch of 10-year-olds' lives to get us to safety. Reply 1, I run a camp and have been a counselor in any situation. It's scary AF, but hopefully those counselors went into survival mode. Like I get into a tunnel vision type mode and can move myself and kids very quickly. The anxiety stays high for hours or days, but you have to act like it doesn't for the kids. They don't know you're scared. It's tough. Reply 2, my friend was working as a camp counselor when a tornado came through the campgrounds. It came on so fast that by the time they were going to shelter in place, it was already pouring sheets of rain. A tree fell on a kid and pinned them while they were running to safety, knocking the kid out and breaking multiple bones. They had to administer emergency medical care to a kid with a serious head injury and waited multiple hours for EMS to reach the campground since the storm was so severe. It was an extremely traumatic situation for my friend, one of the counselors who was administering care and followed her for a long time after the fact. Those camp counselors were probably terrified the whole time. I'm glad you were all able to get out safely. Story 9. The Seoul Halloween crowd was crushed in 2022. I was there with my friends, surrounded by dead people. It took us about 5 hours to leave the scene. I still can't get over it. RIP to the victims. Reply 1. PSA. If you ever find yourself within a crowd crush/human crush situation, put your arms up to your chest, like you're a boxer doing a guard. This should be enough to give your lungs room to breathe. The crush will probably alternate between high pressure and slightly less pressure. Only try to move during the lower pressure periods. Reply 2. This is such good advice and should be boosted. I remember traveling on the metro in a big city to college every day, and one morning the train line I was traveling on stopped operating. Everyone, including me, had to shift to another train with more people, and we were literally packed like sardines. Plus, more people were entering because they needed to get to work/college. I thought I'd drown and die right there. I was literally panicking because I felt like I was losing my breath and consciousness. It definitely is not as grave as the crowd crush mentioned here, but anyone can end up in this situation in a big metro city, and advice like this can save someone from passing out or worse. Reply 3. Some of my queer friends invited me out that night. I almost went, but some work stuff came up and I got home and just collapsed in bed. I woke up to my phone going off with like 200 notifications. BC, I mentioned I might go and everybody was thinking I might be dead. BC, I hadn't been responding for like 2 hours. One of my friends almost died but was resuscitated by CPR and barely made it. It was absolutely terrifying just listening to them talk about it. Reply 4. How do you and your friends survive? Did you see the warning signs and get out of the way before it was too late? Reply 5. My friends and I were heading toward the alley where the accident happened. We were like a meter away from there, but we literally couldn't walk, move, or anything. And one of my friends started having an anxiety attack, so we decided to step into a random bar nearby. We didn't stay inside for more than 20 minutes, and when we came out, there were police officers directing people to the main street. When we got there, the area was full of paramedics, police officers, people performing CPR on others' bodies, and people crying and screaming. The area was cordoned off out of fear that a stampede would break out once people inside the bars found out what had happened and tried to flee, which made it difficult to get out of there. Reply 6. I was working in a bar right next to that alley during the accident. It was so scary for us because we couldn't hear the screaming over the loud music, but suddenly my boss kept going out and coming back in. There were less and less customers. Then a Western girl came in and said there were people lying dead in the street. We thought maybe a car crash and maybe 1 or 2 casualties. I couldn't believe it when the number kept going up. I had to walk 3 hours to get home, and I remember seeing all the police and chaos, people just sobbing on the ground uncontrollably. I immediately quit working there and rarely ever go to Itaewon anymore. Just bad vibes and memories. If I had arrived at work a little later or left a little earlier, I would have been in the crowd too. Just morbid stuff. Story 10. Driving in Mexico, north of Monterrey. I was in a big suburb and suddenly felt this bump from behind. Look over to see a taxi with 2 guys in the front. They were waving for me to pull over. I noticed there was no back seat. I immediately thought, nope, not pulling over to end up robbed, raped, and shot in the desert. I floored it and left it behind. Reply 1. I was driving alone outside of Atlanta, late at night. This guy drove past me in the left lane, pulled into my lane, and then slowed down so I caught up to him. I was annoyed, but didn't think anything of it. So I passed him, and he did it again. Now, I was getting a little worried. Then he started braking. I pulled into the left lane and floored at like 90 miles per hour for a good while. I figured the worst thing that could happen is I get pulled over. Reply 2. I hope that if I'm ever in that position, I have the balls to do what you did. Growing up a girl, the instinct to comply is so freaking powerful. A creep once started chatting me up on a bench, and I can remember screaming at my body to get up and walk away, and it felt like an eternity before I was finally able to actually do it. Felt like I couldn't control my own body, all because I didn't want to be rude to this completely random person I'd never see again. Story 11. Won't be as bad as some. But I was driving in remote Cambridgeshire Fens, 40-ish miles of terrible roads. The sun was going down, and we pulled into a Dodge flat roof pub to use the bathroom. Went in, and the bar was completely full of blokes silently watching the TV. Not one of them moved, said anything, or acknowledged me in any way, not even the barman. Got to the bathroom, but the light wasn't working. I had to piss in the pitch black. Blokes were in the same positions when I got out. Got back in the car, and my GF said she needed the loo too. Told her to put her seatbelt back on, because we were leaving now before we were burnt in the Wickerman. I know it sounds silly, I just didn't want to be there when the sun went down. Drove like the clappers until I reached the motorway, and then we pulled over again. Not sure why, but it was one of the creepiest and most unnerving experiences I've had. Something just told me to scarp her. Reply 1. My husband had a job interview in some random town, and we were looking for a pub that I could kill time in. God, I wish I could remember where it was. All I know is within a minute of walking into this pub, I got a bad feeling. My husband told me he needed to use the restroom, and I muttered in his ear that we needed to leave right away. There were maybe a dozen men there, and they were all staring at us. A couple of them were smiling in a way I didn't like. We left, walked down the block, and found a different pub. I still can't explain that feeling, but I'm glad we left. Didn't know if we were going to get robbed or dosed.
Thanks for watching until the end. If you have a similar story to these that you want to share with us, please leave it in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, please leave us a like and subscribe. For more videos like this one right now, please stop by our channel. Thanks again, and see you next time.